Highland Park time. But I was like, nah, give it time. I was like, it's Highland Park time. Nobody comes on time. Yeah. So they, yeah. The best audience we've ever had. I'm so excited. I really am. I'm so excited to have an audience. Yeah, it's like normally I'm like, if anybody's listening out there in the world. All right, ready? All right. Ready? All right, thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'd like to call to order this hybrid special meeting of the Highland Park Board of Education. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of the public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, the Highland Park Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting, setting forth the time, date, and location to be submitted for publication to the Home News Tribune and Courier News and posted on the board's website at least 48 hours in advance of this meeting. Members of the public who wish to address the board will be given the opportunity to do so before the board adjourns for the evening. Roll call.
Dr. Beatty. Ms. Cassell Dunn.
Here.
Dr. Coleman.
Here.
Mr. Maldonado.
Here.
Dr. Pixley.
Here.
Ms. Bruce.
Here.
Dr. Schoolman. Ms. Stanio.
Here.
Ms. Bergman.
Here. Okay, and now the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I was just saying, all right. Okay, now for the superintendent's report. Ready?
Yep.
Ready? All right. Okay. All right, we're good. Okay. Good evening, everyone. It's great to see a lot of people here tonight. So tonight we are giving a brief update on the tentative budget, which is the purpose of the meeting. Just to recap, typically the state gives us deadlines for when we have to propose a tentative budget and then our final budget. The original tentative budget presentation was adjusted because new governor in office. She delayed her presentation of her state budget, which then pushed back everybody's tentative budgets. Hence, instead of a mid-March tentative budget hearing, we had one at the end of March. So at the end of March, we presented our tentative budget. So I'm going to review that shortly and then review and provide some information on updates since our tentative budget and kind of talk about next steps. So the preliminary budget was presented on March 23rd, like I said. And just a general synopsis, the full presentation and video was sent out on Friday. But some of the highlights included that there was going to be a tax levy increase of 4.14%. And with that increase and budget that was being proposed, we were going to have schools fully staffed with qualified personnel. Instructional resources were updated and aligned to standards for ELA, math, science, and MLL. All of this stuff from the presentation that was shared back in March. And we would continue offering courtesy transportation for all students on hazardous routes. So that was what our budget that we were proposing will maintain. Our budget was also going to include facility improvements like the high school cupola, high school water service line, Bartle fire alarm, Bartle boilers, and replacing exterior lights. So those were some of the facility projects that we were proposing in our budget. Unfortunately, and supporting and the increased preschool enrollment by 15 students. So we're going to be adding an additional preschool class. So our budget will include expanding preschool, and our budget includes supporting a new math curriculum K-5. So those were all the added value into the budget for this coming for next school year. Unfortunately, due to some financial constraints, in order to provide a tentative but balanced budget, the budget at that point in time, as of March, wasn't going to be able to support the makerspace program at the middle school, 4 assistant administrative assistants. We were going to be 1 fewer nurse, so we were going to go to a shared nursing model between middle and high school, since the buildings are attached. We were going to have 1 fewer media center specialist, 1 fewer Bartle interventionist, going from 4 to 3, and 1 fewer secondary social studies teacher. So all of those decisions, when you're looking at budget cuts, came with a lot of thoughts, a lot of discussion between myself, members of the Board of Education, as well as the leadership team as a whole. So when we're facing budget deficits to propose a balanced budget, unfortunately, sometimes difficult decisions have to be made. And what we do is try to prioritize those cuts according to what would be least impact on student instruction. When the budget was presented on March 23rd, we had a couple of things that were really unknown. So the reason for those proposed cuts was because we were projected to have a significant increase in health benefits. So if you go back to that original presentation, I encourage you to do so if you haven't. That was a 20-something% increase by the line item. If you look at our expenditures, that was the single biggest hit to our increase in our budget, was health benefits. So at that time, what our broker gave us was a tentative proposed increase. So we try to go with a sort of worst case scenario. That way we can give that tentative budget, knowing that if we came in a little bit less, we had a little bit of wiggle room, versus having a conversation at the end of April when we give the final presentation and saying, oh no, it's come in worse than we thought, now we have to cut more. So we were trying to be a little bit more conservative with that estimate, and kind of overestimating it, just to make sure we were in good shape. So like I said, the biggest driver of that was our health benefit increase. And so that was really unknown at the time. So that proposed cuts and the proposed budget items was based on really an unknown number that we were kind of guessing at with some data. In addition, we were continuing and still are looking for ways to save money. So the data set that I talked about, including student enrollment, student needs, and then we try to do it with the least impact on student instruction and student achievement. Since the proposed budget, we do have some numbers, which we're really excited to share with the board tonight.
So this is just a summary of what was included in the tentative budget for health benefit insurance. At that time, our broker insurance company, Brown & Brown, had us do a preliminary projection of a 32% increase in our health benefit cost over current year, which equated to, as Dr. Sessa said, $1.5 million, which was 20% of that line item. And the factors really had to do with our medical loss ratio was 94%, and our prescription loss ratio is 211%. What does that mean? It means that for every dollar that Horizon pay, or that we pay for our premium, Horizon's paying out 94 cents for every dollar we pay in premium. And as for prescription, for every dollar we pay for our prescription coverage, they pay out $2.11. So our broker works with Horizon, and at the time of the tentative budget, they were still in marketing. They were marketing back and forth, and we didn't have a finalized rate or renewal.
So now we do. So we're really excited to share again that information. So we were fine. Thank you to our broker at Brown & Brown, who really worked some magic with Horizon and was able to get our medical and prescription to only be a 26.1% increase, which is great. So it's less than what we originally anticipated in the preliminary budget, and a dental at only a 5% increase. So that's pretty good. And the sort of the asterisk by prescription, that projected savings, the reason why we were able to come down from a 32% to a 26.1% is because we are going to migrate our weight loss GLP-1s to Brown & Brown's direct GLP-1 program. So nothing will change in terms of the access to GLP-1. So as we discussed in the tentative budget. What's really driving that cost, I'm just going to go back a screen again, is the prescription loss ratio at 211%. A significant amount of that comes at the members, so it's not necessarily staff, but they call them belly buttons, but the people that use the benefits that come from Highland Park Public Schools on GLP-1s for weight loss was a considerable driver. The Chapter 44 guidelines regulate health benefits for New Jersey public school employees. Many years ago, I don't think they anticipated a miracle weight loss drug that was going to be available through our health insurance. But here we are. Highland Park is no different from a lot of other districts, unfortunately, most districts around the state that are feeling this as well. So what we did was we worked with Brown & Brown to offer the same access to those weight loss drugs, but it's going to be through a more direct program. I'm not going to get into the weeds on that, but it's very easy. It's just the way it's administered. Instead of going to like a Walgreens or a CVS to get it, the belly buttons associated with the Highland Park Horizon prescription plan just go. The prescription goes directly to the manufacturer, and then it's just you get it at your home. You go online, get it, fill in the information. The script goes right to Lilly or Pfizer, whoever creates the drugs, and then the drug comes to your house. So it's just, to me, a little bit easier. You don't have to go to a pharmacy to get them, but it was just a way for us to save a considerable amount of money to the taxpayers and to everybody here. So that projected cost savings from the tentative budget is now $376,000. So we're very excited about that number. You want to speak about
Yeah,
that?
so the state allows districts to increase their tax levy above 2% if their health benefit projected costs are more than the state health plan. So at the time of the tentative budget, we included use of what they call a health benefit adjustment. We included approximately $719,000 into that budget off of that adjustment, which equated to the tax levy, as Dr. Suska mentioned, of 4.14%. Now that we have a decrease in the cost, there's a calculation that's done. So now that the cost of the health benefits is increasing 26.1%, the most that the district could have in that adjustment is around $1,052,000. So we could utilize that $1,052,000 to increase the tax levy above 2%. If we took all of that adjustment, the tax levy would be 5.13%.
Okay. All right. In addition, there's been another update. Since then, like I said in the previous slide, we have been working around the clock nonstop, pretty much it feels like, on trying to figure out ways to produce a balanced budget for the Board of Education and the community as part of our responsibility to be fiscally sound. One of the things in that process, we were trying to figure out all the ways that we could do this, was some code that we found. So we do have a transportation update that will be a cost savings for the district that we're sharing publicly. So based on some clarification and directives provided by the Department of Education, New Jersey Department of Education, and part of the budgeting process, because our school district doesn't provide transportation for our local public school students based on their distance, pursuant to the code, the district does not have the legal authority to issue aid in lieu payments to families of non-public school students. So with that being said, an idea that I'd like to propose to the board that will not be passed tonight, because this is not the budget adoption, but something for us to consider at the formal budget adoption process at the end of April, will be to cut out aid in lieu of transportation money. We actually don't have the legal authority to issue those payments. So with that being said, that savings for projected cost savings to not pay out aid in lieu of transportation for 165 students would be $225,000. So again, we are trying everything. So all that being said, we're at probably a plus $601,000 from what we projected till now. So we're really excited for that chunk of money. So the purpose of that, I will, now that our presentation is done, I'll open it up the board first to have discussion, questions or comments around this. But what will be next steps? So like I said, tonight is not any formal vote on the final budget. That will be done at the end of April, the last Monday in April. But tonight is to hear comments about what it is that we value as a community. I'd like to make a recommendation in the best interest of the students, of the staff, and of the taxpayers. It's a daunting task because there are many different stakeholders involved in these very important decisions. And I don't take that decision lightly. Like I said, we've reviewed so much data. I thank the leadership team tremendously because at a whim, at a drop of the hat, they were able to provide me copious data sets that we could look at information to make informed decisions. So the next step is I'm going to take detailed notes today on our values and make suggestions to the board as my final recommendations for the budget hearing on April 27th. So that being said, in terms of, now that we have $601,000, we have some options with that, as long as barring nothing happens significantly between now and the final budget hearing. That can include going back to those lists of proposed cuts and potentially not having those cuts, or do we do some tax savings? A combination, one, the other, or a combination thereof. So that's sort of where we're at. I know times are hard for everybody. Financial times are very hard. We value our staff and student achievement as well. So like I said, they're certainly not easy decisions to make, but I'll take detailed notes and make some recommendations to the board ahead of the April 27th board meeting. That concludes my report, and I will open up the floor to questions or comments from the Board of Ed.
Good question. Microphone. Oh, there we go. I have a question because I just want to clarify it because there was a lot of information. So because I did take notes as well. We have what is it? 1 point like something million. Are we lacking in? Is that what you're saying? Or that first slide?
The total deficit.
That's the deficit right now.
The initial one?
The
initial one. Okay.
The initial
Okay.
deficit going into the preliminary budget on March 23rd was approximately $1.5 million. That was our deficit. So that's what we had to close. And so what we did was during that time, we proposed a combination of increasing the tax levy 4.14% and those cuts to make up that $1.5 million.
Okay, and so that has since changed, and now we start to place pieces in wherever we.
Correct.
can.
Okay.
Thank
Yes.
you.
And I just want to clarify, that was 1.5 million at a 2% property tax hike, right? Yeah, so that was so the deficit was greater than that. That was a 2% property tax hike.
Yes.
But, yeah.
So with the $600,000 in savings that we've identified, what's the delta? Do we still have 900,000 to account for, or what's the gap that we're trying to fill at this point?
So the 601,000 is what we can essentially put back into the budget in some way, shape, or form. So I don't have to cut any more, which is good news. The idea is, what do we want to do with that $601,000? The options would be, do we decrease that 4.14% on the slide? So do we go less for the taxpayers? And sort of put that money back in there? Do we stick with the 4.14% and save what would equate to $601,000 of the cuts? Do you want to increase more than 4.14%? And I could save more of the positions. So like we have some options. So, how do we want to figure this out to get to our magic number? Because we have a legal obligation by the New Jersey Department of Education to produce a balanced budget on April 27th.
A quick clarifying question. For the aid in lieu for transportation, it was 225, I believe. Just to clarify, that's not a choice for us, if you will. That's we no longer can offer that transportation. It sounded a little bit like it was something we could vote on, but just to be clear,
Correct.
there's nothing to vote on
Yeah,
there.
correct.
That is the law.
Yep.
Okay.
I got a little clarification on that as well, in that the way it's supposed to work is that if you are busing kids because they live far away, then there's this, it's basically like pass-through money that comes from the state that then you pay out to families of non-public school students. We haven't been getting that money. Right, so there's no money from the state dedicated to this for Highland Park. And therefore we just simply are not legally able to continue making those payments.
And distance, okay, right. Because you don't offer busing based on how far away you are, we offer based on the hazardousness of the route. We're not in other districts that do offer distance-based busing, they still have to accept that pass-through money and pay for non-public school students, but we're not in that class anymore. So we can't and aren't supposed to, and have nothing to say about it, do that anymore.
Right.
Got it.
But just give it a little context. I was doing a lot of Googling before I came to look at what other districts are doing. Not that this is surprising because it keeps coming through all the news feeds. However, every other district in New Jersey, or the vast majority of districts in New Jersey, are in the same position that we are. They're the same position, or really, as I was reading, in a considerably worse position. I mean, if you look through Edison, they're proposing a 12% increase in taxes. And their community is up in arms, rightfully 12% is a lot of money. And each of these districts has their own history. It's not comparing it to us, just saying that we're in good company, as it were, that some of the articles were saying it was a perfect storm between this. And yes, we have only a 26% increase in health insurance, but it's 26%. I mean, that's just a lot of money. And other districts had more than that. Some had a little bit less in my research today, but they were all well more than double digits. The increases in health insurance is just really hard to manage. Some districts, as you know, Middletown is closing 2 schools. Piscataway is proposing a 7% increase and proposing to cut 23 positions. West Orange, they're the #1 when you Google right now, and they're proposing cutting 70 full-time positions. So it is a rough time for education in New Jersey right now. So I kind of wanted just to give us that context. And the fact that we did save some money in this process right now, with some good brokering on the part of our insurance, gives us a little leeway. And the other piece that I wanted to say, pass it on, is that, like Dr. Suska said, they have looked and presented to the Finance and Facilities Committee and at other board meetings, lots of options for how to balance this budget. It's not what we came up with, what was recommended, and where we're at the preliminary, is we looked at cuts to courtesy busing. We looked at raising class size. We looked at administration. We looked at athletic programs, world language. Where can money be saved? Every place we looked, it had a greater impact on students, in the opinion of people that we're looking at the time. So that's just giving us some context as to where we are right now. So we're in good company. It's not as bad as some other districts, but it's every single position and every single program obviously has great value, both to the board and to the community. So that's where we are in making a decision.
So I just want to clarify a couple of things. So I think the number we're trying to meet above that 2% gap is like 1,052,000 on the slide prior, right? That's the actual number.
That's the amount that we could increase given the cost of our health benefit plan,
Okay.
in addition to the 2%.
Right. So that's the cap on how much we can raise taxes, which wouldn't necessarily mean we can save everything still.
We probably could. I mean, if we wanted to go, well,
We're short about to
say not-
save the 6 position or the 9 positions, we're short about $100 and some odd $1,000. So
So
we
we'd
would
still
have
have to
to,
cut.
we could, if we left things the way they are, we would have to increase taxes above the 2% to bridge that gap.
Okay.
Just to save, and saving no position.
Right. Because I know at the last meeting, we were talking about kind of no matter what, there's one position we were going to cut, and the max was up to like 14 if we didn't raise it above
Right.
that 2%,
Right.
right? So I'm just trying to get a sense for like what the range is here in terms of positions. So it sounds like no matter what, there's one position, even with the cost savings in healthcare and the aid in lieu and cutting that,
Yes.
right? And then I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, because I know in some of the emails we received, there was requests to think about cutting administration and whatnot. And I know there's been some discussion about that. And I'm wondering if you can talk to us through a little bit about some of the things you looked at and maybe just make that a little more public and transparent so folks know.
Sure. So every year, what I do is propose that once we get the budget, a good handle on where we are at the budget, myself and Mr. Rosa look through, what our deficit is, and then the tax levy options. And what I do is I make a myriad of options to the Board of Education in terms of sort of like what I think is least impactful to student instruction up to most impactful on student achievement. Really, it's not even instruction, it's achievement, because culture and climate in our buildings and feeling part of a school community is far beyond just what happens in the four walls of a classroom on any given day. So what I do is I put that list together and we prioritize that, and all of those have a numerical value. So it's whether it's the resources associated with it, it's the salaries associated with it, benefits associated with it, whatever that is, everything ends up really just becoming sort of a numerical value. And then we try to then rank them in terms of most impact to least impact, and then try to figure out what are the options that I could propose to the board. So some of the options this year that I did propose included a couple of options with some administrative cuts as well. But again, when I do that with the data, so not only is the one line item the data of how much something costs, but the data in terms of its impact. So when we reviewed that kind of data, it didn't seem like it would necessarily be a good option. We're pretty, I don't want to say bare bones, we're pretty bare bones in terms of administrative support on where we cut our administrators. Do we cut an assistant principal? Do we cut a supervisor? What do we do? So those were proposed options as well. But unfortunately, it sort of just didn't make the list of what we all kind of agreed to.
But last year, that was.
Last year it did. Last year was
it did,
one
and
cut.
that helped us to balance the budget.
Yes.
Can you talk about the position that we cut last year?
Yeah, last year, the position that was cut was the district funded programs and district initiatives, supervisor of funded programs and district initiatives. In fact, the only one position. So last year, during the tentative budget, we had a number of cuts. So some staff out there that are listening were part of this conversation with me last year. So last year, I had conversations with some staff saying at the tentative budget, I am proposing a couple of cuts that included a supervisor. I believe at the time I was the media center specialist. There were a couple of makerspace was last year. So I had conversations with those staff. We had the same kind of thing. So the tentative budget time happens a couple weeks later, and we had some new information come to light during that time, which I was able to save all but one position last year. And the position that I cut was an administrative position. That was the only one that was cut last year. And then what I did was I reorged the leadership team to dole out that work, because it has to be done. If we want our title funds, Title I, Title IIA, Title III, Title IV, professional development, affirmative action, so many things that we have to have. I redistributed that work to the members of the leadership team last year. I'm sorry, Dan, did I answer your question? Okay.
I just, to piggyback off of that, while we did cut the supervisor for funded programs last year, we did also add the athletic director. So can you speak a little bit to the financial impact of that and whether it is a gain loss situation?
Sure. So the impact on that was a $20,000 impact overall to the budget. So it wasn't a significant increase to our budget. And that was due to combining. So we looked at the data around how much we were spending on athletic trainers. So we looked at that data set, how much we were spending on staffing for that altogether, and the proposed options to increase the roles of that staffing. And so when all said and done, to be able to provide better services for our student athletes from a medical perspective, and to increase the programming, we added that position. So what we did, but it was only a net of like, it was only a $20,000 increase. So it wasn't a significant increase to the budget. And that was still cutting an administrator. So although it was added, it wasn't adding a new administrator, a new really expensive administrator. The program itself for athletic administration and sports medicine was already in the budget at a significant amount of money. We just increased it slightly to be able to provide more robust services for our student athletes.
So instead of having 4 or 5 people do it part-time and being out of the classroom part-time to run different parts of the athletic program, instead there's now one person.
Correct.
Which also, did that answer your question? So then also going to that, can we talk about the social studies teacher and the cut there?
Oh, yeah, sure. So we were looking at all the student data. Although enrollment this year has been relatively steady, our incoming classes, I think it's our 5th grade going to 6th, I think is about 95 students. So we're seeing a slightly less, we have like one group of students that's significantly more one grade level, but we're trending around 95 to 100. So they're not really that big. So when we looked at the enrollment, and then taking a position, putting it back in more full-time, the numbers show that we are in a position where we don't necessarily need that additional social studies teacher. When we reviewed all of the numbers, the course scheduling is done at the high school. So that was a significant help to look at the course scheduling. So there's no impact to that. So what we did was to make these decisions, we asked all the building administrators were given the task of giving me their projection, including special ed projections, enrollments, class sizes, their scheduling, to sort of make decisions around what this looks like, with some proposed ideas. Unfortunately, I don't have them solidified in terms of what it will look like with these, but knowing that we have some ideas to make sure that we do it to not impact student achievement. And I was confident with these recommendations that they would be the better of the worst choices that we have to make here. Dr. Beatty?
I have more. Yeah, so I just to kind of get a lay for the land, I was looking at the organizational chart and look at how many district administrators we have, not including some of the staff underneath them and stuff, and we have somewhere around 10 or something at the district level, not within the schools, right, and not the staff that are supporting. And I think one of those positions actually being filled by a part-time person right now, even though we have it posted, right? The supervisor of education.
Oh, it's interim, not part-time.
Oh,
it's an interim.
Not the executive director.
No, the
executive
supervisor
director
services is not part-time. It's a full-time position,
right?
But being filled by the interim.
Oh, that one's being filled by an interim too right now, but we have it posted for a permanent. So
yes.
Yeah.
Or in the interview process.
Right, and I think we would argue that's really important given some of the current evaluation of special education, some of the issues that we know have played out with CPAG and whatnot, that we actually need that someone overseeing child study teams and whatnot. So I'm just thinking about, the choices that we're making and being informed by the public and how to make these decisions, right? That we actually can't raise the tax levy enough to save all the positions. We need to know kind of what people value the most. If you are really arguing for district administration, we have 10 over a district. And so, it's thinking about where those cuts would be, given we're a small district that needs coverage around education services, right? We have big facilities issues. We have a wonderful business administrator. but these are the decisions that we're making, right? And then it's about how much to increase that tax levy versus how much to save these positions. And those are essentially the hard decisions that we have to make. And basically we want to hear from everyone about kind of priorities and how we should go about this. Yeah. But I also wanted folks to know that cutting administration had been on the table, was a discussion point, because that was raised, and yeah, and so as some good news both in terms of healthcare as well as the flu have kind of come down, there are options about how to kind of work with this, but yeah.
I was going to say, to piggyback on that, when we had thinking about posting for that position, one option that I did propose to the board was to not backfill that position once we moved the former supervisor into the director position, was to not backfill. So that was an option too when we talked about cuts. Do we not backfill that position? But that is a significant amount of work to put on one person, and Ed Services is a lot because it oversees not only child study team related services, special education, ESL, McKinney-Vento for homeless liaison. That department oversees now our mental health services, the supervisor of counseling, health and wellness, and everything that comes along with it. So it's a really all the legal suits that we deal with for due process and things like that. So the position is a lot, so but I did propose that. Because unfortunately we're in a position where we have to think about those things. Also, I just want to go back. So for anybody who watches every year, I don't get too many watchers for the tentative budget or the final budget hearing, but hopefully maybe I will start having more of that. What I share and I talk about, I want to reiterate, is that budgeting not only is a hard process, but we do it looking at through 3 different lenses. So the administrative team and myself, like a level 1 budget item are those legal requirements. So there are certain things that I can't remove from the budget because they're legal requirements. Mandated time students need to have access to something, or ESL requirements, special ed requirements. There's a lot of legal things that we have that I can't, those are must-haves. So if we talk about needing to open up a new special education class, or we're opening a new program, those are legal requirements. So those have to be in the budget. Some of our level 2 are then the DOE other requirements. So anything with the New Jersey student learning standards, certain music and art requirements, there's a certain number of phys ed minutes that students have to receive. All of those requirements then are at a level 2 budgeting point. And then our level 3 are those that are community values and our board values. And level 2 would be anything in our policy that would be over above in the state requirement. So for example, if we wanted students to have the board, let's say, required environmental science being a board policy, they wanted all students to graduate, we'd have to require that, and then that would have to be a budgeted line item. So that's our level 2 requirements. Our level 3, which is what I think we're almost most passionate about, are those things that we value that are above and beyond the state requirements and legal requirements and our board requirements. Those are things we value, right? Our mental health services, our robust music programs, our robust art programs, world language at the middle school, right? All of these things that are not state mandated requirements, but we value because we really believe in. It's unfortunate that when we have to make budget decisions, the level 3 things, unfortunately, are the ones that end up on that list. So to Dr. Beatty's point, what I do is I take all those things that are not required, are things that we believe in, and that's how we make that list of what it is that we might need to propose to cut. Dr. Pixley?
Yeah, one thing that, maybe just to help add to the dialogue, I know was really confusing for me too, is you see articles that were saying we had a 6% increase in budget. And so, it's kind of a hard thing to reconcile. But what really important, I think, for everyone to understand is, while maybe at the state level, more money is going into education, seemingly, when you have an increase 30% of insurance and 50% in some places, it's not nearly enough to leave districts without a deficit that must be covered by cuts or by increasing taxes. So that
Yeah.
it's too hard to reconcile those two things. So if you could say it more eloquently than me, but I think that's really important.
Yeah, go. Here. No.
Working. Sorry.
I think when people talk about a 6% increase in state aid, but that's only of the money that the state provides to us. So 6% of $34 million is a couple $100,000. And we're looking at a 1.5 or now $1.1 million increase to our health insurance. So that it's really, the percentage is really not of equal value, if that makes sense.
And it was 6% of the $5 million we get, or $6 million we get in aid.
Right.
Right. So, and I actually would like to explain a little bit about the state aid situation, because I actually think that this could be an opportunity to reach out to assembly members and our senator and the governor's office, because the state funding formula, last year, we had a 3% cut in our state aid. This year, we have a 6% cut, but that's because, or 6% increase. But last year, our cut in state aid was actually supposed to be $1.1 million. That's how much we were supposed to get cut. That would have been 20% of our, it would have been awful. The state decided to limit the amount that you could lose to 3% last year. They did the same thing this year. This year, we should have gotten $970,000, but they limited that to 6% increase. So what's insane to me is that the state thought that even though everything was exactly the same in the district, our the number of kids we have, like most of it was very stable. You're talking about a $2 million swing in aid from year to year. That's the way the formula would work. And I mean, that just makes everything extraordinarily difficult. So we were, lucky by limiting it last year, that saved us last year. Limiting it this year really did end up hurting us. We would not be in this situation if we had 970,000 or 600 extra $1,000.
Yeah,
Like
that would have been perfect.
Yeah.
Actually, that would have been perfect.
Can I ask you a question? So I'm interested to hear a bit more about the process, because I think, people, the board comes in and sees a slideshow. We get it a few days earlier, and public sees a slideshow. I think it's important to kind of wrap our heads around the weeks, in some cases, months that this takes. So my understanding correctly that, and Dr. Suska, you ask when you get a sense that the budget's going to be a painful one. You ask the principals to kind of go out to their staff and ask people, what is the most important, where does the data suggest we might be able to cut some things. They put their recommendations together, then it moves up the ladder to the central leadership team, and then you all look at it in conjunction with the board members on that team. I mean, how long does that take from start to finish?
Yeah, so we start the budget. So just to clarify a couple things, we start the budget process around October, November, for the leadership team. So they get a budget manual. We review it with finance and facilities and let them know that we're starting the process. So each of our members of the leadership team builds their budget. At the local level for the schools, it's I want to say it's more cut and paste. It's very much they get a per pupil spending. So the state tells us how much in each building is a per pupil spending. So what we do at the building level is we tell them this is how many students you have times the dollar amount, and then that's your budget. And then what do you want to do with it? So the principals do that. And then at the more department level, whether it's curriculum and instruction, or ed services, counseling, health and wellness, for our school counselors, things like that, they build, and the nurses, they build budgets for their wish list items. Then they meet with myself and Denise, and they go through, and that's typically where we go through their budget and say, no, maybe, yes. for some of the wish list items. And that usually becomes what we try to do is some of the things that might be expended. There might be some things that we could spend out of this year's budget if we have a little savings that we didn't encumber. So sometimes we might say, okay, that's something we can buy this year, put that in. That means we can remove it from next year's to help balance the budget. For some of them, we look at, like, if it's professional development, we turn to our executive director and say, hey, can Title II-A pick up the professional development, or could that be used for, since all of our schools now are Title I funded schools, ooh, could that be a Title I funded something? Or if it's an ESL need, oh, can we use Title III funds for that? So we start like looking at all these different options on how to pull stuff from their budgets during that time, but be able to find it somewhere else. So we do a lot of that in the late fall going into the winter, then usually over winter break. Denise doesn't work. She works her magic at home and kind of puts all of that together and then shares with me where we're at in terms of like how much over budget we are. Then from there, we go back and say, everybody has to cut, insert percentage. So everyone has to cut 5%. Everyone has to cut 10%. So then I usually let the leadership team then prioritize where they want to cut from their budget. Then they come back to us. We kind of redo our figures a little bit. And this sort of just kind of is an ongoing process where we'll go back and sometimes we just make the cuts. Like we'll go back in and say, cut this, take this out, take this out, take this out. And we just kind of do that along the way. We scrutinize every line item. We have, try to make projections on students' needs and stuff like that. And that's sort of where we land.
And that leadership team, it includes representation from each of the schools, right? So the principals are on it, the assistant principals.
Every member of the administrative team is on it.
Okay, so these are not cuts that are sprung on the schools in the dark of night. I mean, this is a 6 months consultative process where a lot of painful decisions are, sort of broached, and then we go back to look at it, consider it more, and then after all that, you have the slide.
Yeah. So the other piece of that though, the personnel part of that, which is the majority of your budget. If you listen to the auditor's presentation, very engaging presentation from our auditors, and you look at that pie chart, majority of our budget is human resource capital, is salaries and benefits. Benefits makes up a big chunk of that. That's not decisions that are happening during that budgeting cycle until once the budget is finalized and we look at where we have to close. If we're looking at $1 million, asking somebody to save a couple dollars on paper, quite honestly, is not really going to help the grand scheme of things. Where we're talking, when we have to cut $1.5 million, we're talking about personnel. So what we do then is I make that list of the level 3, non-required by the state, non-legal requirements. And then from there, I ask the leadership team, please provide me data on students in intervention. Please provide me students participating in our extracurricular activities and sports. Please provide me data on how many people are using our mental health services and what does that look like? Please provide me data on, so if you're a staff member and you were asked, hey, the superintendent needs your intervention data or needs this data set, it's because I am pulling those reports. So I ask my leadership team, pull me a report on this, pull me a report on that, gather this information, gather it. I don't tell them anything about it, just gather it. And then I look at it to try to make sense of that data. And then from there, that's where I use it to make that list for you.
Just one more thing. So here's kind of where I'm going with this. So from my point of view, the slide up there that says, these are the positions that if we don't raise taxes at all or above 2%, these are all the ones that have to go. Of course, it's always possible that, there are positions, administrative ones outside that slide. Maybe but that are better candidates. But given the kind of process you're describing, it would take a lot to convince me, at least, that was the case. But I'm really eager to hear what people in the community think about, yes, anything you want to talk about, but especially the positions, the personnel on that slide. There's the social studies teacher, there's the nurse, there's the 4 administrative assistants, there's some others, there's the makerspace, there's the media center, and there's raising taxes. That's kind of, the pieces we have to play with. So of course, I'm always happy to hear anything the public has to say, but especially in thinking about what the important decisions we have to make over the next couple of weeks, help us to understand which of those pieces are the biggest priorities for you, and include in that universe the tax question. And we will take that very seriously. And we have room now to move things around, which is we didn't have earlier. And I got to say, I can't imagine how much work it must have been to find that savings. Some of it was a deus ex machina from the state, some of it wasn't. So thank you for all that work. And now we have some room, thanks to the work that people have done. So please let us know what we should do with it.
One thing just to say about this iterative process, that's I think, Ethan, for you and others too, to hear about. So an example, when you did projections and thinking about the interventionist at Bartle, I know because I was on the subcommittee for the ESSA, where we were able to actually get some funds at Irving, right? And so those are the kind of things where you're looking at, so in that case, I think there was a part-time that was able to be pulled from ESSA funds. And so you have to think about where you might be able to use those funds. And that was just an example where I know we were able to gain some resources creatively, but I think we've exhausted those creative avenues at this point. That's just one where, I thought was useful.
I have a question. It's Monique here.
Hi, Monique. Go ahead.
Hi. Thank you. I appreciate this discussion, and I am encouraged by the the updates that we have received tonight. But Dr. Sessa, can you talk a little bit about what the administration's understanding is at this time of the anticipated impact of a potential interventionist reduction at Bartle? You just want to hear a little bit more about considering the current impact, the current number of students benefiting from this service, and just give us a little bit more information on that particular item.
Sure. So I know that at the tentative budget, my recommendation was that we are, regardless of, by the way, the interventions, we are seeking out the high impact tutoring grants. So the New Jersey Department of Education did push out more high impact tutoring grants that we are going to be applying for. So my hope is that we can utilize those regardless of our situation to help our student needs. With the math intervention, we had some staff personnel things that happened. One was we had to pull one of the math interventionists to be a classroom teacher because for the world that exists, finding really good, high quality or any long-term leave replacements, especially in math instruction in fourth grade, was very problematic. We had no candidates, and so we had fourth grade students losing out on math. So we pulled one of the math interventionists to cover for that position. There was another personnel issue that caused another staff member to be out a little bit. So unfortunately, right now, that's the issue, is that data isn't significant because we haven't had anybody in there to do that. And we were really trying our hardest. It was actually my communication to them, to the principals, to say at no cost, at no expense, are you going to take these positions out? Because that's always been sort of a reoccurring theme here, is when we're low on staff, we're pulling those people. And it was DEFCON 5, and we had to make a decision, and it was to service those fourth grade students. So we pulled them. So right now, the math intervention doesn't suggest necessarily that we need it, but I know we do. So if we talked about positions I'd like to potentially bring back from the list because our achievement gap is significant, that would be a high priority item for me. But I want to hear from the board and from the community in terms of that. Would definitely be an area. But I will say, my hope is that one of the things I know I put on a slide that we were prioritizing. Let me go back to it. Under included, the third bullet, under included is a math program, K-5. So we're really excited. We're at the final stages of our data collection on our pilot program for that. So please stay tuned for the April 27th board meeting to hear some more information about that. So the recommendation most likely will be coming, I'm thinking, in May to adopt formally a program, which is really great. I'm hopeful that will help close the gap. So maybe over time, with full day preschool for all 3 and 4 year olds, over time, the idea is hopefully we will see less gaps to say that they won't exist is probably not going to happen given the transient nature of our population here in Highland Park. However, we might need to see, I'm hoping to see less of the role of a tier 3 pullout intervention over time. But right now we're not there yet.
Thank you. So, if I'm understanding correctly, we've been underutilizing even without the hard data, right? But
Correct.
we've been underutilizing our
Correct.
interventionists abroad up to now, right? Just
Yes.
to needs in other areas. And I think we do know that interventionists don't just help with filling kind of skill gaps, but they also address sort of our broader goal of differentiation, right, in the classroom. And so, for me, I'm just thinking about the impact of making sure that we, can do what we can to hold on to the interventionists that we have and utilize them as we should be, because it's not only talking about targeted intervention for students who need it the most, but it benefits the broader classroom, right, and the teacher in terms of really achieving this long term goal of ours of differentiating our classrooms instruction.
Yes, correct. So not only do they provide that tier 3 pullout support for intervention, but they do a lot of work with supporting in like a sort of a coaching role to help with the teachers in the classroom too by providing. So they sit out on our intervention and referral services (INRS) committees to make recommendations on interventions that could help for a tier 1 or level 1 support in the classroom. So helping teachers with instructional strategies in the classroom to help students that are struggling before they get there. So yes, Monique, they're utilized in a variety of different ways.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
In addition to the interventionist, I think both from the public, but I think on the board too, we're also concerned about the nurse. And I know as you went through some of the budget process, I think you realized there were some existing contracts that weren't used at kind of their full capacity that would remove some of that workload. I wonder if you could talk a little about that.
Oh, it was just the physicals, the
Right.
athletic physicals. So in the tentative budget, we were talking about that. So we discovered that we were underutilizing our service with Dr. Womack from Robert Wood. Oh, sorry, I got a brain lap somewhere where he's located out of Robert Wood. So after reviewing that contract really closely, we found we were underutilizing that service. So we have the district doctor and Dr. Womack and his team are able to do a lot of that work and reviewing physicals and stuff like that. So that was going to help alleviate some of the sort of more administrative tasks of the nurse.
Yeah, so it really is just reducing on the physical load on
Correct,
nurses,
but not on
not
the-
say all the other kind of things they provide.
Correct. So some of the data around the nurse was looking at, so we did look at the legal requirements and the best practice requirements, and then what other local districts were doing. So we did look at all of those 3 data points. So one was the legal requirement is that a district is legally required to have 1 school nurse per district. Which I don't even agree with. I'm not sure how that's a legal requirement. That is a legal requirement. And there are some districts that do have 1 nurse for an entire district. We looked at Middlesex County schools and a lot of districts that are servicing as close as Dunellen that service between their middle and high school 1 nurse. They have a shared nurse. Some other schools that were operating around just 1 school operating around 1,000 to 1,600 kids were operating with 1 school nurse. So we kind of collected that data to look at what services. And then the other data that we looked at was around the utilization of the nursing services, because I don't want the health services impacted for our students. So what are the uses of the school nurse? And the majority of the reporting that we're seeing is utilizing it for bathroom services, which can be utilized in another capacity for students that still need to access that bathroom. They still have access to it, but we can, kind of look at it through a different lens, but making sure that the medical needs that our students need and any kind of emergency services and things like that are still being required. So that was that data set that we were using to make an informed decision around going to a shared model.
Thanks. Thank you for clarifying that. From somebody that works in school wellness, has worked in a school, prioritizing health and safety for our students is number one for me, knowing how often I did have to contact my nurse and how, how much of a struggle it was if that nurse was out that day. I really do hope that we can prioritize access to our students, regardless of what the bathroom data is. High school is complex. When we think about nurses, I think we think of them very traditionally, but there are so many roles that a nurse plays. They are eyes and ears. They are tier 1. They are mental health screening. They do all of those things, even though it's not maybe within the job description. I just wanted to share that that's what my priority is, is health and safety. I hope that we can prioritize that moving forward.
Thank you.
I'm going to have to agree with Allison with the health and safety because I come from healthcare and I know how overworked nurses can be. And if we're doubling up now what their workload and their caseload, it's going to burn them out. It's going to have some students missed when they really need the help. But I also want to say they're not just going for the bathroom. There's sanitary napkins in there that they don't have access to in the other bathroom. So that is a health issue as well.
Okay, so I have intervention and nurse. Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the board?
I just wanted to say, by following up what Sarah said about creative ideas they've gotten us in pretty good shape until now, and I think we still are, is I noticed in one of the schools that I was reading online, one of their increases in costs was pre-K. And yet you have put ourselves in a position where we're increasing one class, an additional 15 students, which is wonderful for them and wonderful for their families and long-term for us in terms of achievement. And it's not, am I correct to say it's not costing us any additional money? Oh, right, because we got into the pre-K program at the early stages where the governor was funding it differently than it's funded now. So I think that's a big plus for us. Other districts are struggling to keep that going if they got into it at a later time. So we'll be up to 90 students in our pre-K next year. 105, excuse me. So that's impressive. And that's not an increase in our budget, which is helpful.
Yeah, correct. Ethan?
Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, Nikki just said something that's really I hadn't thought of. It is an absolute shame to lose a social studies teacher, but there's a lot of other teachers and to teach social studies as well. I hadn't thought about this. You lose one nurse out of 2, that doubles the workload for the existing nurse, even if that was not a terrible idea, which I'm open to. It's very sudden. And I just feel like if we can have a longer run, I mean, I feel like in addition to prioritizing instruction, I think minimizing the sort of culture shock is really important. And that is an area where the culture shock could be big and we're sort of out of luck. It doesn't work very well.
I also just wanted to speak, it is a very difficult decision to make because I know myself, my taxes are very, very high and we are struggling. And I know that a lot of our community is in that same, position. And it's very hard to look at raising taxes to an extent where we almost did last year, because we did ask a lot of the community last year. I think we raised it 6%. And to do that twice in a row almost would be a very significant ask. So I do hope that, we hear from the community in terms of what they would like us to, think about. But I think it's going to be about balance, at least for me.
Dr. Pixley, I know you want to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And what I think about is, this is clearly a problem, the increases in healthcare and, 20, 30%, 50%. And that's really out of our control. And so when I think about as a community member, what can we do? Where can we enact change to make sure that we're not in the same position next year? What would you recommend we do as people who want to galvanize around this chronic problem that's really going to hurt education in New Jersey?
Yeah, it really is. So good question. So to piggyback on what Ms. Bardman said regarding contacting your local legislation regarding the S2 funding formula, where it's the same formula, they're just changing the weight to make it work. So it's not really equitable. The other is contact your legislation about healthcare reform in the state of New Jersey. In particular, it's called Chapter 44, which governs healthcare. Like I said, I don't think that they were anticipating what they've got now. Chapter 44 doesn't sunset until 2028, 2027. So around that is when it sunsets. So my concern is that if they don't do some fast track legislative reform, the conversations I've been hearing through the superintendents, because we all are struggling with this, is that either the state has to make a decision, either some sort of reform on Chapter 44, or that they force every school district to go into the state plan. So it's like either all go into the state plan to make that work or reform on Chapter 44, because I'm not sure how the next couple of years any school district in the state of New Jersey can survive, especially given like that the GLPs are turning pill form now. So anybody who may have been hesitant around the miracle weight loss drug through the injection will now have access to a pill. So I anticipate that things will only get worse for school districts in the state of New Jersey. So it is problematic. So if you can contact your legislation about reform for Chapter 44, that's what the local superintendents in Middlesex and myself are doing.
I'd just like to add to that, some of these cost increases didn't hit us earlier because we left the New Jersey School Employees Plan earlier, saved us $1 million one year. And so we could have been dealing with these kinds of increases for the last 2 years if we hadn't left. However, that's because districts like ours are leaving, that's leaving that entire program in a death spiral. So it's not working for anyone right now.
All right, anything else from members of the board? Sorry. Oh. Are you working?
Does
Very
work.
impressive.
Oh, okay.
You're working. Okay.
So I just want to piggyback on what you said, contacting legislators. I know that this town knows how to organize. So if there is a big organization or organizing of people, it can really bring some light to it, to the whole idea, and probably make better change. Maybe other districts will follow suit.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the board? Monique?
No, thank you.
Okay.
I look forward to hearing from the community.
Okay. All right. That concludes my report. Thank you.
More questions. I'm sorry.
Just kidding. That does not conclude my report. Hold on.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So I know that on the list are the media center and administrative assistants. Could you clarify what exactly those positions entail? Like what like, I guess, a brief job description of what it is?
The makerspace as well. I'm not familiar.
Makerspace too.
Oh, so Makerspace is a program at the middle school that offers financial literacy and technology standards for students at the middle school. And then assisted administrative assistants are additional secretaries. They're secretaries. We have two categories. So some secretaries throughout the district, and media center specialists govern the libraries, but also they do media literacy out of we have 2.5 in the district that oversee the curation of library materials, media materials, and media literacy, like helping students and teachers navigate like EBSCOhost and searching criteria and online, good, effective online searching and things like that.
There actually are like one in each school.
So we have one that's middle and high school,
Okay.
one at Bartle, and then a part-time one at Irving.
Okay, because I do think that that's something that is important if they're teaching them media and understanding media and knowing the difference between fact and fiction and because there's a lot of information out there. The web is really big. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and it's really good to have our students know how to tell the difference.
Thank you.
We also have the dollar values for each of the non-supported bullet points so that we can quantify how much savings each one of those is.
Yeah, so the plan is going to be, like I said, I'm taking detailed notes. So from the board's perspective, a balance of maybe some version of some cuts plus increased taxes, but not terribly much is what I'm hearing from the board. That would include supporting maintenance of the math interventionists, a school nurse, and potentially media center specialist as priority items. What I'll do is hear from members of the community. I'll take detailed notes around that as well. And then what my plan is going to be is taking all of this information, going back to it, taking that priority list, and then giving it to, we'll speak about it in finance and facilities and share it as part of the final budget presentation. Okay, that now concludes my report. Thank you.
Okay, now we're moving on to our public comment section on the 2026-2027 budget. I just want to clarify a few things. I know there's a lot of people here. We're going to prioritize people who came in person first. We're going to do a 3-minute limit, time limit, but also very genuinely, like we added this meeting because we understand the severity of what we're talking about here, and we desperately want to hear the feedback from staff, from the community, like what we as a community value. These are very difficult decisions, and we very genuinely want to hear from you about what the values are. So, just please, the Highland Park Board of Education welcomes public participation and has reserved this time for your comments on the 2026-2027 budget. You introduce yourself, please give your name and address.
Okay,
And
let me sign that first. Maybe I can do two things at once.
We could put that form on the table so that the
Maybe I
people
can
waiting to speak can sign.
I am Rob Scott, and I am a Highland Park taxpayer, and I'm a voter, and I believe in democracy, and I'm here today because of that. And I like all this talk about values and priorities, and that's what we do when we make a budget, right? We do our values and then priorities, and then we make the budget. But the budget is also math. So I read the prior thing and I looked at it very closely, and there was missing math and there were admissions, and it was a very frustrating experience for me. And there's still omissions. And the very last question that was asked, there were two great questions from the board. Dan, you got at something very early on, and it's going to come to a key number that I'm going to offer, which is 127,000. And then that other question, what is the cost of the proposed cuts? Because I'm here because I don't like those proposed cuts, because I don't want makerspace cut, because that's the kind of thing that put the Artemis astronauts on the moon, right? And our students deserve that. And that's what I want, okay? And I don't want to take it lying down in the Trump era that we're not going to do that. And I want a school nurse because I believe in public health, right? And I want a social studies teacher, right? Because that was really important for me. And I want those interventionists because I want services for disabled people like me and for our students. I want all those things. They're good, and taking those away is a harm. The negligence in the budget, there's all this talk about process, right? Like if the process was perfect, then we should love the outcome, right? But we can also judge by the outcome. The outcome is that question, that essential, fundamental question. How much does the school nurse cost? What does it cost to restore the school nurse? What does it cost to restore a social studies teacher? We don't have those numbers. I can't do the math. I like to do spreadsheets, right? But I can't do the math because we don't have those numbers. So let me give you a little bit of math. One thing that I noticed in the first presentation was the whole slide about expenses, which is missing here, right? And there was an omission of a number, which was the difference between what we spent this year and what's proposed to be spent next year. And that told me something very important. That told me this was an austerity budget about cuts, notwithstanding all the stuff about the healthcare, because the budget proposal, the preliminary budget proposal, was a cut of $127,000, right? From last year. So it's a budget where we spend next year less than we're spending this year, right? Which seemed bonkers with state aid going up, right? Now, if we knew how much the school nurse caught, I'll bet that $127 would cover it. It's my guess. I don't know, but it wasn't in the super's presentation. So now we hear, I had to do the math quickly, right? But we get $225,000 of money that apparently we've been spending all along that we were never allowed to spend. Oops. We get that plus the money because we decided, oh, we can do something else with the Ozempic prescriptions. That's excellent. I don't think it's that creative, though. I mean, it's sort of the obvious thing to do. So that comes to, I think it was $601,000. Now, we can raise, and if we go to the maximum tax amount.
Rob, we're past 3 minutes.
Can you give me
So
just?
Can you wrap it up?
I'll wrap it up. Yeah, I can do that. Add in just a small increase on top of that. And now we got 900 grand if we do 5.1.3%, which I think many people in this town would be fine with. The cost of that $127,000, just to put this in perspective, to the average taxpayer is $2.61 a month. That's go to Dunkin' Donuts or don't go to Dunkin' Donuts once a month and don't spend $2.79 on a cup of coffee. And you know what? I want our kids to have makerspace and a nurse and be future astronauts. And I am willing to sacrifice my coffee or my Netflix subscription. Thank you.
Hi, Nicole Marioni, 1701 Cherry Street. But from here forward, I'm going to be speaking on behalf of Janie Major, the high school nurse. Unfortunately, she couldn't be here with us this evening, but as I start reading this document that she wrote, the eyes will all be Janie. Good evening. I am speaking tonight in order to provide the facts so you are in a position to make an informed decision about combining the middle school and high school nurse. I am in the position to do so as I am the nurse in the high school and have been for the past 20 years. At the last meeting, the board asked appropriate questions about combining the middle and high school nurse. I do not believe you received accurate answers to your questions. Once before, there was only one nurse, and I was that person, the middle high school nurse for 8 years. I was housed in the high school. This was physically challenging to say the least. Having to run to the fields, the third floors in each building, attend meetings for both schools, conduct registration and sports physicals for both schools was a lot. I was a lot younger then. I was very concerned for the safety of our students, especially in emergency situations. A new superintendent came in and understood the safety concerns, the needs of the different age groups, and the workload of 2 schools, and a middle school nurse was hired. At the last meeting, you were made to believe that once we stop the bathroom visits to the nurse, the nursing visits will decrease. According to code, the nurse's office must have a bathroom. It can be adjacent. Furthermore, it is not only inaccurate but offensive to suggest that the primary function of the nurse is to provide bathroom visits. Students who use turnstiles to sign in and log in bathroom does not mean that there is no clinical contact. The number of visits is high for a number of reasons, including the policy to have a gender-neutral bathroom, the new policy of closure of high school bathrooms on the first floor on the afternoon, and students being told to go to the nurse's bathroom if needed. The nurse's bathroom is the only location for menstrual products, and many students come to lay down to use the heating pad or need Tylenol for their cramps. We also have many students who come in with tears or emotional issues that need to be dealt with on the spot. The other question you asked was how sports physicals were going to be managed. I just want to let you know what is entailed. A student hands in the sports physical. The nurses check it. If something is missing, if the cardiac or other clearance is needed, or the wrong forms, the patients and parents are notified and the form is returned to the student. Oftentimes, the student's doctors needs to be called. If the form is fine, it is entered into Genesis, and there are appropriate sports roster cover sheet is applied for our school's doctor to approve. There are many emails between the coaches and the nurse updating information regarding physicals and injuries. Even with the summer hours to do the physicals that come in for fall sports, there are still physicals that arrive for fall, winter, and spring seasons. To give you an idea, from September 18th to March 1st, 362 physicals came in. The only role our school doctor has is approving and signing off and rubber stamping them. Please also consider the role of the school nurse and the state mandates when you are making this decision. 836 screenings, IHPs, registration, immunization records, incident reports for student and staff, home instruction, 504s, the emergency preparedness, PE, and attendance notes, and medication administration, diabetic and asthmatic students. In other words, a lot falls on the shoulders of a school nurse. At the last meeting, you mentioned bringing out-of-district students back into the district. These students are often medically needy and will only put an additional load upon a single nurse. I know this is not an easy decision to make, and budgets require careful attention. When I did the job, I had a full-time clinical para who was able to assist with inputting information into Genesis, helping with the sports physicals, helping with the filing, and supervising the nurse's office while she was not present. I have heard talk that there are districts with only one nurse. This is not correct. Yes, they can have one certified school nurse as required by code, but many of these have an RN working under a CSN. I suggest we consider doing the same, hiring an RN for the high school, saving costs by not hiring a CSN. Perhaps cutting a nurse will save some money, but most likely not as much as you think, and it will have a cascading effects that will touch everything from academics to athletics, and most important, to the physical and emotional needs of our students. Thank you, Janie Mazer.
My name is Karen Kelly. I'm the school nurse from the middle school. Sorry, can you hear me now? Okay, I'm the school nurse from the middle school. I do not live in town. I live in South Plainfield. However, when I took this job 5 years ago, it was what I dreamed of doing. I can now say that I can't imagine being anywhere else. I can't imagine taking care of any other students than our middle school students. That being said, I'm sorry. I would like to speak about the elimination of the nursing position and the merger of the middle school and the high school and the health offices. I feel that there's no need to repeat anything that Nurse Mazer said. There will be some things that I'm going to repeat, but I think they need to be repeated. But I would like to echo those things and these duties, and some of them do go uncounted as far as the nursing service plan. Some of those things that go uncounted are unexpected emergencies, clerical duties, seeing students when they need to be seen for bathroom or other reasons, when they become emotional, when there is a health emergency for one of our staff members that we can't track, when there is an emergency as far as leaving the building. Each office presently, each nurse, each office sees about 18 to 25 students a day. This is a full capacity. When I say that, that is not including our bathroom visits. I know that for a fact because Ms. Mazer has her students sign in and out for a bathroom. I do not. Our students who come in through my bathroom, maybe it's my mistake, but they have a smart pass. So we have a way of tracking our students with a smart pass. So we know they're in our bathroom, but we do not have them. I do not have them sign in and out in Genesis. It does change our numbers and scale them a little bit, but some of our students who come in and out, they may be sitting in here. They may just be walking across the hall to use my bathroom instead of walking down the hall. So that's why I don't have them do it. We also have an amount of 7 students who need daily meds between both schools.
We have 5 students with diabetes who need constant or intermittent monitoring, along with compensation and insulin and teaching. We had 2 new students this year that were brand new diabetics that we need to take time to teach them about their diabetes and their routines. We have 86 students that have as-needed medications. That includes our asthma medications, our insulin medications, if somebody goes into diabetic shock or needs a glucose boost. We also have students who have EpiPens and allergies. We also have students who have cardiac issues that don't have medication that we would need to go see if they were needed to be seen. We also have students who have a seizure disorder, who have seizure medications. By the way, some of these medications that they're on for as-needed medications, they cannot be delegated to a lay person. Medications such as Valtoco and Neffy, which we don't have any Neffy as of yet, which is the nasal epinephrine, cannot be.
I'm sorry, we're at the limit, so could you wrap it up?
Some of the concerns that I had was the age span between the groups between high school and middle school. The age span is 10 to 21. Some of these students might not be comfortable. They may not seek medical attention. They may not want to discuss whatever they're feeling or whatever they're doing in that span. I also would like to present the fact that if there is one nurse, what happens if there's one child who is in the nurse's office being attended to, and there's an emergency out on the field, there's an emergency in a calf, there's an emergency in the hallway, there's an emergency in the classroom, there's an emergency out on the field. Who's caring for that student who was in the office? Finally, I would like to just present the board with a presentation for you to peruse on your own time. This is a half-year report of all the numbers of all the services that the nurses provide. It is pulled from Genesis. It is the half-year report from the nursing service plan. It is the dates I used from September till April, and it's quite quantitative. So it will show you exactly what happens in the nurse's office, what we do in the nurse's office. And I just would like to have you use it when you are making those decisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ellie Spurner-Lipton, and I'm a student in the middle school. I do not know about budgets and these complex things, but what I do know is that I have relied on a nurse throughout this entire district. I have connected with them, but one nurse stood out from them, and that was Nurse Kill. But I also feel calling her a nurse is a disturbance to her because she's much more than that. She's a mentor, a teacher, someone I can learn from. But most importantly, besides being a nurse, she's a friend. And I want to give every new middle schooler to have that experience as her. I want everyone to be able to experience that. And if we have one big one nurse, not each student who feels this way, and I go there almost every single day, and I'm not joking when I say that. And so many others too. I would know more than most people that so many students consistently go there, and some for medical reasons, but a lot for just emotional reasons. And to take that away, to take something that I preferably have caused, like when I have a good day, I will say to Nurse Kelly, I will tell her I had a good day today. She's someone who I can trust, and I'm not going to speak for the high school nurse because I do not know her, but I bet you that a lot of people feel the same way about her. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Abby Stern Cardinal. I live on Harper Street. I have a couple quick questions. I know there's a lot of people talking, so I'm going to be relatively quick. Just some.
Abby, could you move the mic up? I have a ice maker in my.
Is that better? Is that okay? So just a couple of quick questions kind of along the lines of the math and the money. So in terms of the two ways that money was saved, as Rob said, it's $601,000. And I'm also curious how much each of those items cost, but a quick mental math says that I counted there are 8 positions. So that's not counting the makerspace, but the rest were positions. One of them, my understanding, is going to be cut regardless, so that leaves 7. Again, doing the quick mental math, if all of those people made $100,000, which I doubt they all do, that's 700,000. So when you take that away, that's not far from 600,000. We can save a lot of these positions. I'm not going to speak to any one position, but to me, there's also kind of the perspective of I don't want to pit people's kind of professions and what they put everything into. So many of these people play multiple roles, and everything that I've heard people say, but I also know the administrative assistants play more than just, like a small role. Like everybody plays a large role. So I also want to just recognize that these are people's lives. We're talking about them as line items, but they're also people's lives. And I know we all know that, but I just want to recognize that here. I am in favor of the 4% or whatever percent tax increase. I think that that is perfectly reasonable. Again, seeing other towns like Edison proposing 12%, we are nowhere near that. We need to, again, preserve these services. If we start to make these cuts, it not only affects the quality of our school, but our community and people wanting to move here. What we want to do is have people want to move here for our great schools, and not that we're, cutting these critical services. When people move here, we get more taxpayers, we get more of a, tax benefit to everybody, but we need to have a good school district. And making some of these cuts, again, I'm not going to go over the specifics because they all serve critical roles, specifically the people. But I think we need to do the tax increase, which honestly is not that much. So.
Beak, if you could just maybe hold the mic up just so that the people can also hear. Thank you. Sorry.
Is this high enough that you can hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Hi, Andy Zappa, 131 Johnson Street. So the fundamental issue in front of the school board this evening is not really a funding problem. It's a priorities problem that you guys need to focus upon. So the school nurse, I'm going to have to hold this up closer because as I age, it's hard for me to read easy things that are close to my face. Nurse's office is not a medical office. It may be the one place in this building and the one next to it where there are no rules attached. Some kids go there because it might be the only safe place they have. You can't put a ratio on that. How many of us have walked into a hospital when there was a loved one there? And as soon as we walked in the room, we saw the nurse standing next to their bedside, and half of our problems went away. That's what that nurse is to that person in the school. The makerspace teacher. You might be cutting the one person in this school who is actually capable of teaching kids the responsible use of AI because she's an IT professional from her background. Have you thought about reallocating and maybe thinking about that as a broader way to use the position? They could teach the educator something as well. Librarian rather, the media person. Schools teach to the test. This is just a fundamental fact. And a library is an institution where children discover what they love, who they are, what they need beyond a grade. These are institutions that are usually the institutions. When democracy starts to fail, they crumble. And that cannot be what this school holds as a value, or the school board holds as a value. Cannot let it get buried in a budget line. The same applies to a social studies teacher. Social studies, civics, history, social responsibility. This is how you create citizens in the United States or other countries throughout this globe. Again, you cannot put a value on that in this day and age. That cannot be a school board value that you guys want to allow. The interventionist. I was here to talk about CBEC a couple months back. I'm looking around the room and there's people in this room. I'm getting emotional because they were involved in the interventions with my son in the work and how he found his confidence again. And the makerspace teacher was part of that. And the fact that I look around in the room and I see 12 to 15 people who are all part of my kid's education and think that you're going to cut away an interventionist from Bartle, you're going to kick the can down the road for a kid between 2nd and 5th grade and let the middle school handle it. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You can't do it. And with the administrative folks, look, That's not an easy job. It's not a pretty job. But unless the administrators are the one that are going to take on the task, the ones that got added, like the athletic director, or the superintendent's contract getting increased, that's not fundamental good use of money. The administrative assistants, they're the people at the bottom lines. They're doing all the hard work here. You have to find a way to keep those jobs. And here's the thing. A lot of you folks up here, you have higher education. You had to earn those credentials by being challenged on something and defend your data. So do the same thing for this district. Challenge what you're shown and stand up. And when you have to raise your hand in a vote, do it because you're doing it what is right, not because there's more hands up in the room and you feel weird about it. Thank you.
Let me know if you can hear me. Elise, okay, good. Hi, Board of Ed. My name is Max Warren. I live at 201 South 2nd Avenue. I currently function as a public school nurse in a middle school with over 1,000 students. So let me paint a picture for you. Here's what it looks like. Eliminating a middle school nurse and expanding one nurse's responsibility to over 800 students is not a neutral budget decision. It is a choice about what this district is willing to risk. Let me tell you what one nurse for 800 students looks like to me. It looks like having a child have an asthmatic episode while the nurse is managing a diabetic alert on the other side of the building. It looks like a student in a mental health crisis waiting because the nurse is dispensing medication to other children. It looks like a seizure, an allergic reaction, a suspected abuse disclosure, and one person responsible for all of it. This is not a bathroom pass operation. This is triage for our most vulnerable public health school students. As you've evidenced, this isn't a budget constraint. This is a choice. I request that the Board of Ed members challenge this choice as I intend to challenge it. I will be running for the Board of Education for the second time because decisions like this are exactly why these seats matter. Thank you.
Can you guys hear me? Budget cuts in a school district are often framed as necessary financial decisions, but the true cost extends far beyond spreadsheets and bottom lines. When these cuts result in the loss of staff who genuinely care about students' well-being, teachers, counselors, aides, administrative assistants, and support personnel, we risk undermining the very foundation of education. These are individuals who notice when a student is struggling, who provide encouragement during difficult times, and who help create a safe, supportive environment where learning can thrive. Losing such dedicated staff is not just a reduction in numbers, it is a loss of relationships, trust, and stability for students who rely on these connections every day. For many students, especially those facing challenges outside the classroom, these educators and support staff are a critical lifeline. Removing them sends a message that emotional support and individualized attention are secondary, when in reality, they are essential to a student's success. If we are truly committed to preparing students for the future, we must recognize that their well-being is inseparable from their academic achievement. Cutting the very people who nurture, guide, and advocate for students is a disservice that can have lasting consequences. Our students deserve more than just access to an education. They deserve a community who support them as whole individuals.
Hi, my name is Buffy Wild Greenberg. I'm a public school parent, 60 North 7th Avenue. First, I'd like the board to please lift the 3-minute time cap and to invite anyone up who was cut off early, especially any staff members. But I'd like to ask the board to please lift the 3-minute time cap for public comment tonight.
democracy. Kind of like going to a no kings rally, right?
A lot of people here who don't know we have online that want to speak. So I want to make sure we have the opportunity to do that.
Would we be able to do like 1 or 2 minutes extra? Because it seems like everybody's using about 4 or 5, but I understand why we need to cap it.
I mean, so what we can do is do 4 minutes. There's also people online. We want everybody to have a chance to speak, but we can also circle back through if somebody wants to speak longer.
I think 4 minutes sounds fine. Everyone deserves a chance to speak. And that means that some people don't speak for as long as they would like to. I think that's a good balance. I think we have to have a reasonable cap that everyone in line and at home can say their piece and not be 1 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, first, I just like to start that, like, this is really shameful. People should not have to come up here close to tears begging you not to cut essential staff. We shouldn't have to stand up here and have a middle school student tell you, please don't cut the nurse. She's what gets me through the day. We shouldn't have to have the nurse come up here and say, this is what I actually do, right? So you can look at this and be like, wow, what a great democracy. What a great town. Yes, I totally agree. But this is also an absolute failure of the administration that any of us are in this position where we have to beg you, don't cut an interventionist at Bartle who helps people's kids learn how to read. So those were not part of my prepared remarks, but it's just what I was feeling. So Dr. Siska's budget reflects priorities that are antithetical to our town's values. Her budget prioritizes high-paid administrators and surveillance cameras over a social studies teacher, a school nurse, and other educators. This is a budget that asks those with the most to sacrifice the least. We need a budget that reflects our values, a budget that invests in our teaching and nursing staff, expands services for students with disabilities, and creative programs like Makerspace, and values the administrative assistants who ensure our schools are run efficiently. Tonight, I've heard a lot of talk about numbers, and I think it's important to put those in context. It can be awkward to talk about people's salaries, but one thing is we don't know is what the salaries are associated with the positions that we want to cut. What we do know is that we are going to save about $225,000, which is great news. But again, let's put that number in context. That is approximately Dr. Siska's salary. Currently, it's $194,000. In a few years, it will be exactly $225,000, right? So when we prioritize administrator salaries, it means that we're taking money away from things that help our students. I heard a lot of people tonight talk about the school nurse, which is what I was planning to do as well. I want to be very clear that while I'm focusing on the school nurse, I stand in complete solidarity with each of the workers who the superintendent is seeking to cut. If the middle school and high school nurse have to share one nurse, the nurse's caseload will go from about 345 students to 854 students. The New Jersey legislature has considered several times capping the school nurse caseload at 750 students, which in my opinion is still too high. However, that has failed multiple times, but just to, again, give you guys some perspective that this is really, really a bad idea. My son has type 1 diabetes, and Nurse Kelly is the reason that he is safe and that he stays alive at school. Here's just a small sample of what she does. She monitors his blood sugars remotely, checks his doctor's office for any high blood sugars. She calculates the carbs in his food and monitors his food intake. She ensures that he's given the correct amount of insulin for each meal and snack. She tests his blood sugar if there's an equipment failure. She updates me throughout the day with any issues, including just a few hours ago, and sends me a daily report every afternoon. She treats his blood sugar lows quickly and calmly. If this is not done, he could have a seizure, he could fall unconscious, and he could die. She's trained on his diabetes equipment, his injections, and his glucagon. She also creates a warm and welcoming environment for all children, particularly children who may have difficulty getting through the school day. She never sits down.
She's constantly caring for students, talking to parents, or coordinating care for field trips, which for a child with type 1 diabetes is extremely complicated and generally involves much more work than I think probably anyone in this room can imagine. This is what she does for just one child, but he's not exceptional. She provides this level of care for every student in the middle school. On Friday, I spoke with the executive director of the National School Nurse Association, and I asked them, how do you determine safe staffing ratios for schools? They sent me a 4-page position paper that they published last year, which included more than 24 data points that should be considered when you're determining staffing ratios in a school district. I didn't hear any of those data points discussed tonight. So I'll end with a question, which is, one, has this Board of Education or the administration contacted the National School Nurse Association, and have they conducted the assessment recommended? If they have, can that be shared with the public tonight and published on our district website? Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me? My name is Dara Botvinnik. I live at 348 Becker Street. I'm a teacher here at the middle school. I teach reading intervention. I've been blessed to be in the district for a long time, and I'm very appreciative of everyone's efforts and work on behalf of the district. I'm going to bring it down. I wanted to actually echo a lot of what other people are saying, but my basic message is that we are doing so well right now at the middle school, and I don't know if people know that. And I do want to speak on behalf of the entire staff, and I think we want to not rock the boat. We are moving in the right direction. I really, really urge you not, if we can do this another way and we can raise taxes a little bit as a taxpayer, I am saying I would rather pay a little bit more and keep us moving forward. I think that is the big picture. I think we are thinking in a little way versus the big progressive momentum. In the middle school, oops, I just lost it. I'm so sorry. Hold on one second. It just went away. I got it. Okay. In the middle school, we decreased our discipline infractions by 42.9%. It's huge. You can't talk about taking away a cycle. If you think that's not going to impact our future, that's incorrect. We increased our ELA benchmark scores by 23.7%. We increased our math benchmark scores by 3.6. We are moving in the right direction. And this is perhaps the biggest one, and this impacts, well, it's not the biggest, but it's another big one. We are doing writing across the curriculum and doing teaching models at more than I've ever done in my entire experience at the middle school. And our current social studies teacher is a big part of that. Our secretary is Spanish speaking, and a big part of that makerspace is doing writing across the curriculum in addition. And my children, I have 2 children who went through the district, and they are both STEM. And one of them is graduating with a PhD in applied math, and one of them is studying physics. I urge you not to take away STEM from a middle school curriculum. I also want to speak to having been in the district for a long time. It was mentioned, but it was not really, I think, emphasized to the degree that I remember it. The middle school and the high school, as a community, we have done an incredible amount to separate middle from high school, to the extent that we created different schedules when we started, when we ended, to actually go back to sharing a nurse, and you're going to ask a 6th grade girl or a 7th grade girl or an 8th grade girl or an 8th grade boy or a 6th grade boy to go into a space with an 11th or 12th grade individual. It's scary to me that we're having that conversation. So I do recognize that this is a hard time, but it sounds like we're very close. And my basic message, financially speaking, is give it another year. We are growing. If you can raise taxes a little bit or somewhat and keep things stable for this year, things change yearly. Let's see what's going on next year. I really, really ask you to keep all the positions in the district. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay? Hi, my name is Gina Donato, and I am the Makerspace and Personal Finance teacher at the middle school. I have proudly served the Highland Park School District for 22 years. My role has evolved alongside our students' needs from providing computer support at Irving and Bartle to transitioning with our sixth graders to the middle school. For over 2 decades, I have watched technology move from a peripheral elective to the very core of how our students live, work, and learn. In the middle school, 6th and 7th graders currently receive Makerspace. 6th grade receives Makerspace for 2 marking periods, and 7th grade receives Makerspace for 1 marking period. And in 8th grade, they have a class called Personal Finance, which is required by the state to have that class before they graduate from middle school. In 6th and 7th grade, we focus on digital citizenship and use Fuse to teach the engineering design process. With digital citizenship, we aren't just teaching kids how to use tools, we are teaching them how to be responsible digital citizens. This includes data privacy, identifying phishing, and crucially, how to use AI, artificial intelligence, effectively and ethically within the parameters of copyright law. We also use the Fuse program which is a program that's developed by Northwestern University. This interest-driven STEAM lab offers 36 different challenges ranging from 3D design and printing, electronic circuits to video game and coding. Because students choose their own path and level up based on their ability, it is one of the most naturally differentiated programs in our district. Some of the real-world impacts. The true value of this program is seen in the sparks it ignites. We are planting seeds in middle school that grow into careers and businesses. Entrepreneurship. One of my former students took the fundamental skills that he learned in my class, specifically 3D design and vinyl cutting, and used this to launch his own business once he reached high school. Career pathways. We see a district pipeline from our middle school makerspace to higher education. We have many alumni currently majoring in computer science, computer engineering, and other STEM fields. In 8th grade, this is our 4th year, we pivoted to personal finance. Our students learn how to shop for bank accounts, file taxes. Every 8th grader this year will be able to fill out their own 1040 form in the eyes of a 14-year-old. I can proudly say that. The impact is clear. Many of our former students have gone on to major in business, including finance, investing, and management. We are giving them a head start in financial literacy before they ever receive their first paycheck. The risk of elimination. I firmly believe that a well-rounded middle school experience must include a balance of art, theater, and makerspace. If Fuse is no longer feasible due to budget restrictions, the technology program at the middle school can be altered to allow students to be exposed to STEAM without the expense of Fuse. Fuse costs around $6,000 a year. Removing this program doesn't just eliminate a class, it eliminates a career spark for students who thrive in hands-on technical environments. Furthermore, we must consider the logistical impact. Eliminating this program would force our remaining specials to absorb these students, likely spiking class sizes anywhere from 30 to 35 students. This would significantly diminish the quality of instruction for every student in the building. In closing, these are not just electives, they are vital life and career foundations. I ask you to continue supporting a curriculum that prepares Highland Park students to be safe, financially literate, and technologically capable leaders. Thank you for your time and your dedication to our students.
Hi. Oh, sorry. Hi, my name is Arden Lee. I don't have a script prepared, but I'm a current junior at Highland Park High School, and I was looking at this on Zoom, and I realized, wow, high schoolers really have to do better because looking in the crowd, there isn't a single one of my peers with us today. But I'm here today because as a student of Highland Park, I realized that our staff members are truly what creates the environment that makes the educational impact of Highland Park so strong. And I'm here today to staunchly advocate against striking any of the positions because as a student in both the middle school and the high school, I realized that the institutions where students learn are a microcosm of their democracy in the future. I'm someone that I would say is pretty civically engaged in Highland Park, but that doesn't start out of nowhere if you don't cultivate the skills within an environment. If you know John Dewey, this is a core part of his educational pedagogy. It's something that I think Highland Park has long adopted, but this is directly threatened by the fact that we're currently proposing or maybe potentially not supporting a social studies teacher in the 8th grade and forcing one from the high school to move. I'm also stating this because I've seen the impact that our social studies teachers have had in our high school. This is the place where individuals realize that they can actually use their voice the way I am right now to speak in front of individuals and show that their opinion has something that matters. This is what you see in ballot boxes in the future. And if we want to ever address the problem we have with voting today and voting turnout, that starts in the high school and in the middle schools. I also want to talk about the nurse a little because as an individual who has a menstrual cycle and who has friends who have menstrual cycles, I don't think you guys realize that data points don't actually reflect how individuals are impacted by the programs that you're talking about. I know friends who have went to the nurse, found her unavailable in the moment due to maybe a lunch break. That's normal. But then when they need something that's actually urgent, they go to the middle school nurse. I fear that if this isn't an opportunity anymore, you'll see health and safety access be extremely hindered. Individuals won't feel that the environment that they have at school is a safe place where they can privately express their needs and their health needs. This is something that comes with student empowerment, and it's something that we can't be considered lightly. I want to emphasize this again. Data points are not reflective of how the student experiences different programs. And also, the class sizes are something that's a big deal as well. Students feel when their class sizes increase even by one student. Students feel diluted and students feel diminished. It's important to say that individuals need small private class environments to actually thrive in Highland Park. Individuals bring students to Highland Park because they understand that they're going to get one-on-one interactive classroom meetings and discussion. This isn't possible if we just increase class sizes and expect students to just deal with it, because most students can't. And especially after COVID-19, I'm seeing learning losses around me. I'm seeing learning losses in front of me as I tutor students. They feel discouraged in their current classroom environments. And if we want to be an academically excellent school district, I can't stress enough that maintaining smaller class sizes, maintaining one-on-one dialogue with students is how you truly empower them. We're seeing students who are disenchanted, and I don't want teachers to continue feeling as if they're ignored because students feel ignored themselves. This is something that doesn't happen from just an individual student-teacher relationship. It's something that happens on the school board level. I know there aren't many high school students here. I know there aren't much middle school students here, but I hope this gives you a little bit of insight into how policy actually translates into student action and student impact. I know the board prioritizes a pragmatic approach to budgeting. I've interviewed Dr. Siska last year. I appreciate that. But I think the language that has been used in this meeting really enraged me a little bit, and that's why I decided to come to speak here today. Thank you very much.
Not really wanting to follow that act. I'm Kristen Springer at 423 Denison Street, and I came to talk about the nurse, which I will, but there has been a lot that's been said about the nurse, and I'll reiterate some of it, but not all of it. But I also want to talk about kind of the language of talking about the budget cuts. I'm noticing that we've moved to save these positions. So it's kind of now into a framework of these are already lost and we're going to jump in and save them. They haven't been lost, right? We need to really think about if this really is a conversation about where to cut the budget, and then we really shouldn't even be necessarily having this conversation, right? It should be, what are the options that we have to save money? And that's the conversation we should be having, instead of having them already basically being cut and then we're coming here to save them. It's a really disingenuous kind of backwards way of talking about it. That's troubling to me. I also picked up on what you guys said in terms of you are trying to find budget cuts that don't have, you're trying to save things that have the greatest impact on students. I'm not quite sure how cutting these positions could have any more of a greater impact on students. These are fundamental, critical positions. And, you know, you haven't provided any other data for us to understand what else could be cut instead of these positions, right? It's a real large problem. And as much as you all talk about wanting to have communication, wanting to have input, you've given us very limited parameters of which we're allowed to have input, which is not really having full input. And that's frustrating to me. Okay, so I came to talk about the nurse. One thing about the nurse, and we've talked about the bathroom data. The bathrooms are locked often, right? And so people go to the nurse because the bathrooms are locked. That's not a reason why the nurse isn't important. That's because the bathrooms are locked, and it's also seemed very dismissive to the important role that the nurses play to have that be your data point instead of all of the other things that the nurses do. Also from an equity and excellence point of view, which we supposedly value greatly, the nurse is a central place for people who do not have other medical resources, who are underprivileged, who are lower SES. This is where they go to, it's where people can go to have, sometimes it's the only line of medical care, the only place for people to get medical care. And it's a safe space where other places aren't necessarily as safe of a space. So it's troubling from a district that talks about equity and excellence that this is what we're cutting, or we're talking about cutting. Same with the resource interventionist, right? That is also troubling in terms of a district that talks about equity and excellence. And the nurse also prioritizes and focuses on kids with disabilities. Again, an issue with equity and excellence. So I think that, and all of these other positions too really are essential for the school to survive. I think that everything else has been said, but I really would ask you to instead think about what are the places that we can cut that are going to save these essential staff. What is more important? What has a greater impact on students than the nurses and the staff? And so go back and see where else we can cut or raise taxes. And next time, maybe have a conversation with the community that actually includes the data that are useful for us to be able to have a full conversation and be full members in our kids' education. So thank you.
Mary Botion, 709 Madison Ave, regarding the proposal to cut the Makerspace program. 10 years ago, Dr. Suska, when you first arrived in Highland Park, several of us met with you, and we were so grateful that you recognized STEM was sorely missing in our early grades, and you immediately supported getting these programs into our school system. So clearly you know the value of this program to our middle school kids. At one point, you actually even had the title of Supervisor of Curriculum and Instruction for STEM. So the ask now is for you please to work whatever magic you can to preserve this program, whatever it would take to make sure we don't go back to where we were 10 years ago, where there was a huge science and engineering gap for our Highland Park middle school kids. New Brunswick Middle School just put in a STEM program finally about 2 years ago. Maybe you could talk to them or other middle schools to see how are they funding their learning labs. I also want to emphasize why the middle school makerspace concept is so valuable, specifically in middle school versus waiting till high school. Research shows that by the time students reach high school, many view science and engineering as uninteresting, unimportant, irrelevant, and something that's totally beyond their reach. They become focused on many other activities and social situations. These learning labs that are offered in middle school are shown to help this age group make science and math relevant. And it lets them see that a career in these fields might actually be for them. Business Insider says, quote, providing students with exposure to STEM in the middle school years is a must. The point is, if we wait until high school to offer this type of program, it's too late. You will miss the opportunity of this ideal age group window. The other thing I want to emphasize is how important it is for us to have this program here on the premises in the middle school, as opposed to thinking that kids can just go to a private STEM program after school or to a summer STEM camp. These programs, after school and summer programs, are crazy expensive. Even at Rutgers, a 4-day STEM program is $500. One of their 5-day STEM programs starts at $1,600. Every public school, middle school student in Highland Park deserves these programs, not just the wealthiest families. Last but not least, if I have done the math correctly, our Fuse program puts about over 200 middle school kids through it every year at a cost of only $30 per student. That is a huge value in every way to make sure that these kids have this critical opportunity. Please, let's not go backwards 10 years on this. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Keisha Ingram. I'm a secretary at Irving School. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Seska and the board for taking the time to consider the different ways to come up with ways to pay the positions. But what I want to speak to specifically is the secretaries. So the secretaries in Highland Park are the face of the district. They are the ones that know all of your children, they know their needs, and they serve everyone from visitors to teachers to staff to janitors, anyone in the district. We've had cuts for secretaries before, and it wasn't a good thing. And we came back around to having 2 secretaries in every single one of our school offices because we need it. So if we cut the secretaries again, the workload for the secretaries that remain is something that's going to be a real issue for us. And I know that the jobs that my fellow secretaries do right now in the district, it's priceless. You can't put a price on the service that the administrative staff does for this district, not just in serving the students, but in serving the staff. Again, we're the face of the district. So I understand that budget cuts, you guys are taking a lot into consideration. I would ask you to really think about what the secretaries do for the district and ways that we can save those positions. Thank you.
Hey, good evening. Robert Savage, 123 Magnolia Street. And I missed your name, but thank you so much for coming up and talk about the secretaries. I know when I started on the board, one of the things that had been cut was secretaries. And then over years, it was all about building the secretaries back up because there was a very hard task of keeping track of everything in the schools without the secretaries there. And, I was on that side of the table for 9 years. This is probably the worst part of the job right here, trying to go through the budget. But right now, I think, as Kristen said, you guys are working at it from the wrong angle because we're trying to save some positions, like a social studies teacher. I mean, that hurts. Just the idea of, in a Trump era, looking at removing a social studies teacher, it just screams to me of following his agenda. Losing interventionists that we work so hard to bring into the schools. Makerspace, which is a program which confused the heck out of me, but everyone was saying, hey, this is a great thing. And, the students came up with anti-bullying campaigns in Makerspace. They came up with so many different things in Makerspace. And as everyone so eloquently talked about it, it is a backbone. It is a program that really brings student-led teaching rather than teacher-led teaching, at a point where they really have to learn the idea that, oh, we have something to say here and something to get out of this. I've made a lot of decisions sitting behind that table that in the end of the day, I felt like, oh, I needed to fight harder for this. I think at the end of the day, if you approve any of these cuts, you're going to, after your time is done there, this is going to be one of those times where you regret that decision and you don't feel good about it. Later on, 2 years, 4 years down the road, it's just like, oh, I should have done better. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Keith Presti. I'm the president of the Highland Park Education Association, speaking tonight on behalf of the membership. First, I think the budget needs a line item for a new mic stand because this one's terrible, but we'll make it work. Also, I know we haven't really been following it, but my remarks are about 8 minutes. So Susan Doozy and Chris Broadfield will be yielding their time to me. Okay. I want to begin by acknowledging that we understand the district is facing real financial pressure. See what I mean? We understand. Don't make me. Okay. Okay. We understand that health benefit costs and other rising expenses are creating difficult budget decisions. But understanding that pressure does not mean that proposed cuts should go unquestioned, and it certainly does not mean that the community should accept them without full explanation. What has been presented so far is a tentative budget, and that matters. It matters. It means the district still has time to provide information, answer questions, and reconsider harmful choices before anything is finalized. And that is exactly why so many staff members are here tonight and community members. Our members are not reacting out of rumor or emotion alone. They are reacting because they understand from inside the buildings what these positions and programs actually do every day. They understand how schools function in real life, not just on a spreadsheet. At the same time, tonight's presentation makes clear that this remains a moving target. We appreciate receiving updated health benefit information and a few other additional savings. But even with that update, the district still has acknowledged that it is still weighing options, still reviewing feedback, and still deciding how to use the additional flexibility that now appears to exist. That makes it even more important that proposed staffing cuts not be treated as automatic or inevitable. That is not a small issue. That is the issue. I also want to address the way part of this conversation has been framed publicly. At the March 23rd meeting, there was discussion of prescription costs, GLP-1 medications, and language referring to people on the district's health plan as belly buttons. That was and is troubling to many of our members, and that same language was used again this evening. Employees and their families should not be reduced to a talking point in a budget discussion. Rising healthcare and prescription costs are real issues, but they are systemic issues. They are not the fault of the staff members and dependents who rely on the coverage they have. Budget pressure does not justify language that minimizes or stigmatizes the people who work here and the families they insure. Our members deserve better than that. That conversation should reflect professionalism, accuracy, and respect. One of the clearest concerns we are hearing, especially from the middle school, is the proposal to move to a shared middle school and high school nurse model. This is not a minor operational adjustment. This raises real concerns about safety, supervision, student comfort, age appropriateness, and continuity of care. The middle school and high school together serve a large student population plus staff. Middle school students and high school students are not interchangeable groups. They are different in age, maturity, developmental needs, and comfort level. Staff has raised legitimate concerns that younger students may be less likely to seek care in a shared setting with much older students. They have raised concerns about emergencies happening at the same time in different locations. They have raised concerns about supervision, rest space, bathroom access, mobility, and whether the physical spaces being considered are even appropriate for nursing services. These are not abstract objections. These are building level, student-centered concerns grounded in actual experience. If the district believes this model is workable, then it should present the nursing service plan and clearly explain in practical terms how one nurse will safely and effectively serve all students and staff across the combined campus. We are also very concerned about reductions to support staff, including secretarial support. A school main office is not just another budget line. It is the front door of the school. It handles phones, parents, attendance, student needs, visitors, deliveries, emergencies, and constant day-to-day operations. If those positions are reduced or frozen, the district should not simply assume that the remaining staff will absorb the work. It should explain exactly how those functions will continue without overloading staff or diminishing service to students and families. We are also concerned about cuts to programs and positions that support continuity, intervention, and student opportunity. If programs are functioning, if students are being served, and if schools are doing well, then the burden should be on the district to prove why those cuts are educationally sound, not just financially convenient. And that leads to a broader point. For many staff members, this does not feel like one isolated budget cycle. It feels like part of a longer pattern of erosion. Over time, schools lose pieces of what once made them broader, richer, and more supportive for students. Programs shrink, opportunities narrow, support structures get thinner. Each individual cut may be described as manageable, but the cumulative effect is real. At some point, we have to ask not just what the district is under pressure, but what kind of district we are choosing to become. The association is not here tonight to tell the board which individual employees, positions, or programs should be cut. That is not our role, but it is absolutely our role to ask whether all priorities are being examined fairly, whether all alternatives have seriously been considered, and whether the district has fully justified the impact those proposals would have on students, staff, and daily school operations. We appreciate the additional information shared tonight, but before permanent staffing decisions are made, the public still deserves clear answers. What additional alternatives were considered? Which cuts are still actually necessary? How will services be maintained? How will workloads be redistributed? And what will the real impact be on students? Those questions need answers before this budget is finalized. Our members are here tonight and participating virtually because they care deeply about this district and the students they serve. They are informed, they are engaged, and they know what these schools need in order to function well. We urge the board to move carefully, share information fully, and reconsider any cuts that would weaken student support, school operations, safety, and educational quality. Thank you.
Okay, how many people do we have online? Okay, and so if you're online and you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. Anyone? Oh, yeah, Christian, you can go ahead. Oh, Cristobal, can you?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. So thank you everybody for the time. And this is like I've been to these meetings a couple of times. I actually wanted to talk to the public more than anything because I've been to this meeting when the current superintendent decided that 7:45 was a great time to start the middle school. I've been here before when there was a great decision to end parallel support for some classes, second grade classes. My kid is one of those classes that needs support. There's not enough paraprofessionals. I've been here when we talk about the problem with the after school program that was privatized and now is more expensive for many families. I really just want to talk to the public. I really want to talk to the public. I want to talk to the students. This is your nurses. These are your teachers. These are your school system. If you think the system is not working, please, please, please mobilize. It's time to move. And the same people will make the same decisions. We'll have the same propositions. It's always about cutting. It's always about cutting. I think it is time for people to start organizing themselves and start seeing, not just coming because, as I said before, I have been here for multiple times with every time bringing awareness to the problems of making decisions that are making the school system worse. When the 7:45 school time, having the paraprofessionals, having less paraprofessionals in our classes, the problem with the after school program that now is more expensive, is less accessible for people. the problem now with the nurse, with teachers, with how do I explain? I think it's hard to explain to people that yes, we need more than one nurse every 800 people. How do we explain someone that you need librarians? How do we explain that these things are vital elements of the system? Naturally, you don't use a nurse all the time. That's the same thing with your insurance. But again, I think this is an issue in which the people, students, the neighbors have to mobilize. I think it's time for us to take a next step because we will going to get the same recommendations from the same people. I wish I would consider the opinion, but I really not very hopeful. Thank you.
Okay, do we have someone else? Nicole, can you hear me? You can go ahead.
Hi, good evening. My name is Nicole Ziegas. I'm on 116 Washington Avenue. I just would like to say I was born and raised in this town and went through the entire school system, and I found it to be amazing, which is why when I decided to raise my family here and keep them in the school system, it was because of the experiences I had, which also then put me onto the PTO for the Bartle School and my son being in Irving School. And with all that being said, I see what administration does, and I see from the teachers to the nurses to the administrative assistants, principals, vice principals, they all play in a role. But one of the biggest hearts of all the schools are the administrative assistants. They are the key to what holds everything together. When there's an emergency, I've seen in the Bartle School them run at any moment's time to help out when they need to be where they need to be, to calm a student down, to help a teacher out when it's in need. And, you know, even with the nurses too, they're there in the time of need. And I just think it's going to be something that would be so wrong to do to take away from these children. They are memories for these children, and they are the biggest hearts that help these school systems out. And I just think that's one thing that the parents and the administrative needs to know, that at the end of the day, it's not just dollars. It's also people's, you know, well-being. It's their livelihoods. It's, you know, their home also. And I just wanted to let that be known from me.
Nicole. I'm sorry. Liana?
How are you? Hi, how are you?
Great, we can hear you.
Hi. So I am a parent of two kids at the schools. We've gone through Irving and Bartle. I don't know how my kids would have survived without the administrators, without the teachers that they had. We've had such a great experience at these schools that taking anybody away from them would just diminish their experience and their future education. I myself am a teacher at a high school, and we have two nurses. I can't even imagine having one nurse. It just isn't fathomable to think that it could function without. There's so many things that everyone has said already about kids who take medication, and if there's things that happen that's an emergency, you can't have one nurse. It's not feasible. There's a lot that happens there. It's not just a place to go to the bathroom. Getting rid of a social study teacher at this time, it's really scary. We need to have the truth out there, and social study teachers do that. I know the Board of Ed and the leaders, it's a really hard position to be in, and I just thank you for doing that job. It's not great. You have a tough job to do. And in closing, let's remind ourselves that those astronauts that just came back were all public school kids. So it's our responsibility to make the future kids go to space and to make future leaders. So cutting a lot of those people, it's really bad. All right. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Andrea, you can go ahead. Andrea, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, just trying to unmute. So this is Andrew Alexander, 116 North 3rd Avenue. I've heard a lot of great comments tonight. I know there's a lot to be concerned about. I don't think that any of I don't want to pit one of these positions against the other. I think they're all really important. I understand all the concerns about the school nurse, and it seems like that's a huge concern to more than double the nurse's workload, especially when we hear tonight what really goes into the job. But the thing that I wanted to talk to you is I wanted to speak to my experience, and that is my concern about eliminating an interventionist position at Bartle. So I just want to talk about my experience in the district. I remember years ago when it was like nearly impossible to get help for a child who was 2 years behind in reading, because I was told so many children needed help and there's nobody available to help, and we didn't have enough interventionists. And and I had to fight to get help. And now fast forward years later, and back then we had a system that was unworkable, and now we actually have a system that's working. I don't know how many people are familiar with the MAP testing at Bartle, but now we have benchmark testing, and if your child is behind in the benchmark, they just automatically get intervention. You get a letter saying your child's benchmark score was this, and your child's gonna be placed in intervention. And I've seen what a transformative difference it has made. And I've seen a child go from hating to read to not being able to go to sleep at night without reading to themselves. And I would hate for the district to lose that. I also know in our town that there's been so much concern over the years over our test scores and student performance. And I keep hearing that we're on an upswing, and I can see it personally. So I just wanted to speak out for the interventionists, and my support for those positions. And also I heard the board and the superintendent wants to hear the public's concerns. So, I hope that, that position and all these other positions can be saved. I hope we can do what's in the best interest of the students, their mental health, their education. And, I know not everybody's in this position, but I'll say I'd be happy to pay more in taxes to preserve these positions, if that's what the choice that we're presented with. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. I'm sorry. Oh, Laura?
Yes, hello, thank you. 148 Duclos Lane. I just wanted to also say I completely support keeping all of these positions and finding other alternatives, such as what people are saying, potentially raising taxes or reexamining other aspects of the budget. As everyone has been saying, these are all crucial positions for the health and safety of our children and for creating a civic society that we all want to live in. And I would also just ask the board members to please listen to these stakeholders. We are we're your neighbors, we're your teachers, we're your, the students are speaking, parents are speaking, the nurses are speaking, everyone is speaking against this idea. And you board members represent us. And we are saying we do not like this proposal. It is not a good idea for our school. And unfortunately, this board or the previous boards and the superintendent have a history of not listening to the community when we come out against a proposal that the community does not like. And I'm asking you this time to please listen to all of us. Not one person has spoken in favor of this proposal. Please listen to us and make a decision that the community and your neighbors and the people who are working for the school district all support. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Are there any more, I just announced, anyone online, if you'd like to speak, raise your hand now. We'll going once, going twice. Okay, no more Zoom. Does anyone else in person want to speak? Yep.
Abby Stern Cardinal again. I just want to say a couple quick things. One is a question that I forgot to ask earlier about the busing that we've been paying for. My understanding is, as you were saying in the beginning, I was listening before I got here, we didn't need to be paying this because we're not providing courtesy busing in town, so we don't need to be paying when someone is maybe going to a charter school or some other out of district. My question is, how long has it been that we shouldn't have been paying this? And If this money should have been coming to the state, can we go after getting money that we were owed? It seems really crazy to me that I don't know if this is new or if this has been going on for years, that we've been paying money that we shouldn't have. So that was one question. And then my kind of broad comment about raising taxes. So I want to acknowledge for the people who maybe whose skin is, prickling when they hear about raising taxes. I want to acknowledge that we are in an affordability crisis right now. This is the reality of where we are, but this is not a Highland Park or district created crisis. I'm going to go really big picture. What is causing this crisis is our federal leaders. This is Trump. This is why we can't afford groceries and gas, and we cannot save that situation by cutting critical school functions. We cannot allow ourselves to be redirected locally and saying, what do we have to do? This is going to continue. We can't buy into the narrative of these, I'll say, crazy people on the federal level and say, okay, well, now it's the Democrats in the Democratic town raising taxes. No, this is what we need to do to save our schools. This is not something where we can say, oh, we need to never raise taxes because people can't afford groceries and gas. That is not your responsibility and not possible for us as a district to save that situation. We need to provide our students and our community with the services they need. So that's what I want to say.
Thank you, Abby. Is there anyone else for public comment? Sorry, Rob?
I want this to be productive because, oh my God, you've heard from so many people, right, about the town's priorities. And there have been questions asked, like, what do these positions cost and stuff? And so the process is there's going to be a vote on April 29th. Well, how does this conversation continue after today, given all that you've heard, right? How are you going to continue to listen to folks in the town, right? And take it forward from today? That's the question.
That's funny because that's actually what I was going to ask. Like, how do we continue this conversation? Because there's a lot that's going on right now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay. I guess if there's no more public comment, then I move that we adjourn. All in favor? Aye.
Good night, everyone.